Hey friends, this is Derrick Broze, the Conscious Resistance Network. Today we're going to be revisiting an old subject, Jeffrey Epstein, one that should still be fresh in people's minds because we've covered it here quite often over the last few years. Since 2015, I've been investigating Jeffrey Epstein, and we put out our documentary, Bringing Down Jeffrey Epstein. We've written quite a bit. I've done a number of interviews on this topic, so I stay up with the Epstein news when it does pop up. First, though, I want to remind you guys to bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com. This is where you can get all of my latest content. You can keep yourself updated. I've been trying really hard to bring you hard-hitting interviews with Dr. Shiva, with hard-hitting activists like Justin Harvey. I've got new interviews coming up with Dr. Andrew Kaufman. I've got an interview with a doctor who thinks Dr. Andrew Kaufman's wrong. We're going to be doing some more updates on the finders. I also am going to be talking with people who want to bring you valid information about how to prepare and repair your immune system and build your health. So just lots of good things coming up. And if you want to support us, please share our work. If you want to go the extra mile, you can always subscribe at patreon.com/Derrick Broze. And of course, follow us on all of our social media channels. Okay, so I wrote this article yesterday for The Mind Unleashed. It says, appeals court refuses to overturn Jeffrey Epstein's infamous sweetheart deal. Epstein's victims were dealt another blow from the legal system after an appeals court ruled against overturning the serial abuser's infamous sweetheart deal from 2007. And this was just on yesterday, on Tuesday, 2-1 majority rejected an appeal from one of the victims of disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, which would have thrown out a non-prosecution agreement that provided immunity to Epstein, his aides, and unnamed co-conspirators. Epstein's escapades became front-page news in the summer of 2019 when he was arrested and faced charges for abusing dozens of young girls at his homes in Florida, New York, New Mexico, and Paris. He died of an alleged suicide on August 19th while in custody on new sex crime charges filed in New York. The latest attempt to overturn Epstein's arrangement with Florida prosecutors was filed by Courtney Wild, who we've talked about here before. She said that she was abused by Epstein at his Palm Beach mansion at the age of 14. And the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals rejected her appeal, stating that despite the government's attempt at shielding Epstein from harm, the Crimes Victims' Rights Act does not allow for relief of victims who are mistreated by prosecutors prior to a formal charge being filed. So, in other words, a bunch of garbage. As I've covered in my documentary, and as I will detail again in a moment, the government down in Florida, the prosecutors, as well as, of course, the feds, were all involved in a cover-up of Epstein. Courthouse News reports, quote, claiming rampant violations of the Crimes Victims' Rights Act, women abused by Epstein in their youth have been fighting in court since 2008 to overturn his and his aides' federal immunity, to obtain grand jury records, and to hold public hearings where they can air their grievances against the Justice Department. Now, they obviously know he's dead, but they're just trying to get the information out. Despite our sympathy for Miss Wild and others like her who suffered unspeakable horror at Epstein's hands, only to be left in the dark, and so it seems, affirmatively misled by government lawyers, we find ourselves constrained to deny her petition. U.S. Circuit Judge Kevin Newsom, an appointee of President Donald Trump, wrote for the majority. So one of these judges appointed by Trump, imagine that, basically said, our hands are tied. He came up with some technicality and said, we can't help you out. Sorry you were raped. Sorry you were abused. Sorry. After the decision, Courtney Wild stated, quote, the government intentionally misled the victims but found a way to get away with it by working with the child molester to get around the law. The judges ruled in their favor. How? The two judges who ruled against Wild claimed that overturning the original non-prosecution agreement could potentially infringe on prosecutors and law enforcement officials' decision-making process if they feel their decisions may be later overturned. So basically saying, look, if we act, well, then the cops won't be able to do their job. They're going to be afraid we're just going to overthrow their charges. No, if cops are doing, bullshit charges and they're, covering things up and they're using non-prosecution deals to get away with things, then yeah, they should be concerned. Senior U.S. Circuit Judge Frank Hull, who is the one dissenting vote, said that the other judges' decisions ignore the terms of the Crimes Victims' Rights Act. The judge wrote, quote, the majority's contorted statutory interpretation materially revises the statute's plain text and guts victims' rights under the CVRA. Nothing, and I mean nothing, in the CVRA's plain text requires the majority's result. So she pretty clearly disdained and pushed back against what they were claiming. Wild's attorney Paul Cassell told Courthouse News that it's clear the act as written by Congress can apply even before an indictment is filed. He said that Courtney Wild plans to file for an en banc rehearing before the full 11th Circuit. If that rehearing is rejected, the claims could eventually make their way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And despite rejecting Wild's appeal, the judges acknowledged that, quote, mysteries still exist about how Epstein and his co-conspirators escaped federal prosecution for multiple sex trafficking crimes against over 30 minor girls in Florida. Yes, mysteries still exist that people are covering up. And this cover-up didn't just start now with this latest decision. There's in fact a history of cover-ups. As I say in here, this is not the first time the controversial plea deal has been discussed in court. In 2008, following Epstein's plea agreement, attorney Brad Edwards filed suit against the U.S. government claiming the feds failed to involve the victims in the settlement, which was an obligation required by the Crimes Victims' Rights Act. Edwards was one of the lawyers representing the women who brought the original suit against Epstein, and he's also the attorney that I interviewed. You guys have seen that interview here on my channel. If not, you can search Brad Edwards on our channel, Brad Edwards and Derrick Broze, and see the interview that we did together in late 2018, December 2018, I believe. In December 2015, U.S. District Judge Kenneth Mara sided with the U.S. Attorney's Office and Epstein in asserting that 15,000 pages of documents must remain private. And the women behind the suit said they believe Epstein's connections have helped him get his sweetheart prison deal. And I think this is one important point. The fact that the U.S. Circuit Judge Kevin Newsom was appointed by Donald Trump should not be ignored. Trump was an associate of Epstein throughout the 1990s and 2000s. And after becoming president, Donald Trump appointed Alexander Acosta to U.S. Labor Secretary. Acosta is the same attorney who helped seal Epstein's non-prosecution agreement. In the spring of 2017, Acosta, who was at the time serving as a Miami U.S. attorney, was nominated by Donald Trump and approved by the U.S. Congress. When Acosta was questioned during his nomination hearing regarding his role in Epstein's deal, he downplayed the collusion and claimed that there might not be enough evidence to convict Epstein. And I've covered this before in my documentary, where he basically says that he was under attack by strong legal superstar attorneys like Alan Dershowitz and others. But we know that he played a role. And in fact, Acosta even said that he was told to back off because Epstein was intelligence. And in a 2015 Politico report, the court documents that were released through litigation showed that prosecutors cooperated with Epstein's attorneys to keep the deal secret. And this includes Assistant U.S. Attorney Marie Villafana, who used her personal Gmail account to suggest to one of Epstein's lawyers that they file legal papers in a different jurisdiction as a way to, quote, hopefully cut the press coverage significantly. And Villafana told Epstein's attorney that she would include our standard language regarding resolving all criminal liability. And I will mention co-conspirators, but I would prefer not to highlight for the judge all of the other crimes and all of the other persons that we could charge. I mean, it's clear there was collusion going on in the government. And as I say here, the closing of yet another case against Epstein and his co-conspirators will likely continue to fuel theories that Epstein was working for an as yet unnamed intelligence agency. And that links right there to another report I did about Epstein's intelligence connections and all of the pieces of the puzzle we have related to that. Now, I want to give you a little bit more of Epstein news. This is more than a week old, but I'd never covered it recently. But I want to cover it now because I just mentioned Brad Edwards that I wrote. I did an interview with Brad Edwards, and we included that in the documentary. I've talked to him about this situation, and he's been fighting for these women since 2005, trying to get some justice. Well, he just put out a new book in the last couple of weeks, which I haven't read yet. I'm trying to get in touch with him to get another interview, and I want to get a copy of the book too. But these articles that we're looking at here reveal new details on Jeffrey Epstein, according to Brad Edwards and his book. The book is titled, let me see, but you can see right here, The Craziest Bits from New Epstein Book. Jacko, which is Michael Jackson, Trump, Prince Andrew, and the CIA. Jeffrey Epstein beckoned lawyer Brad Edwards into a private room to issue a warning. It was early 2010, and the men, who were courtroom rivals for the past 2 years, had been waiting for a deposition to begin. And Epstein said, "How long is this going to go on, Brad?" And Edwards replied, "Till it is over, I guess." Epstein then warned Edwards, who represented multiple victims of him, that he held the advantage. Epstein apparently said, "The difference is that I have unfair power at my fingertips. I hired a former MMA champion who's out there in the hallway, and I have access to all the resources in the world. You don't even know who all my friends are." Edwards said this in his new book, which is called Relentless Pursuit. And it's interesting. And you can see even here in this article, they say Epstein's Hollywood pipeline ran straight to Weinstein. People have been wanting to connect them together for a while, and now we have more evidence of that. Epstein and Harvey Weinstein, the story of a friendship and a betrayal. Basically, the idea, what we are told here, is that Epstein distanced himself from Weinstein after mogul Weinstein abused or probably raped one of Epstein's, quote, favorite girls. And she was rejected, or she rejected Weinstein, but, he abused her. And this pissed off Epstein. And we were told something similar, that in the story of at least one of the lawsuits against Donald Trump, one of the women state that she was violently raped by Donald Trump and by Epstein, and that Epstein was upset that Trump had her, So it seems to be that Epstein gets jealous while sharing his, what he believed was his property, right? Unfortunately, he's just a fucking crazy ass dude. Weinstein, Epstein, all these folks. And again, Rolling Stone reporting in his new book, attorney Bradley J. Edwards details the decade he spent on the case against billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. More here, Clinton, Trump, and Prince Andrew. More sordid details from new Epstein book. And I will put some of these links in there. But the point here is, guys, that the story still is not over. Yes, people are writing books now. I've even thought about turning my documentary into a book, and we probably will do an update and do a part 2 of bringing down Jeffrey Epstein to cover everything that happened after his arrest and all the crazy things that have happened and how none of it adds up and what we've seen since then. So please do stay tuned for that. But it's important to remember that, like I said with the other story, the victims are still being screwed over by the system, by people who were appointed by Clinton and by Trump, and even one of the judges was appointed by Bush. All these same people, are playing their role. And people who are afraid for the information to come out, those co-conspirators, Ghislaine Maxwell, Les Wexner, and plenty of others who I'm sure we don't even know about, are thankful that Epstein's apparently dead or gone, and that this story is basically gone from the media. Somebody else who is thankful that this story is gone from the media is Bill Gates, who right now is being lauded as the champion for the world with COVID-19. But when I search Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein, you see, even on CIA Google, you get 2.7 million results within 0.55 seconds. Bill Gates met with Jeffrey Epstein many times despite his past. Bill Gates had a closer relationship with Jeffrey Epstein than he claimed. Bill Gates addressed to his ties to Epstein, I made a mistake. Bill Gates' relationship with Epstein deeper than originally thought. There's pictures of them together. MIT's new report this is just from January 10, 2020. MIT's new report on Jeffrey Epstein raises questions about his relationship to Bill Gates and other people from MIT. And September 2019, Bill Gates now has his own Jeffrey Epstein problem. Coincidentally, nobody's asking those questions anymore. Think about that. Just as recently as October and December, even January 2020, people are asking questions about Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, if you talk about Bill Gates, the only thing they're going to talk about is coronavirus and how he's saving the world. Strange place we live in. And pedophiles are in powerful positions. We've covered this a lot on my channel. Pedophiles and the people who support them and who are part of that are in the intelligence agencies, in the intelligence community. They're in various positions in government. They're in various positions in religions. They're in schools. They're teachers. They're in the police departments. I'm not trying to scare anybody and have people looking behind every bush. I'm just saying this is the reality. When you wake up, it's a sick, disturbing reality. And I'm not going to shy away from it just because some people want to think that being quote unquote love and light means ignoring things. Look, guys, this is the conscious resistance, and I've had people tell me, oh, what you resist persists. Yeah, that's true to some degree, but that doesn't mean you can ignore the reality around you. And the reality is that the world has been overtaken by this dark energy, what some people call the devil, Satan, Lucifer, reptilians, dark energy, fear, hate, the duality. You think of it how you want, but the point is that energy has infected the minds of many human beings, and those people are not content to let us live and let live and everybody basically get along and decide how they want to organize their lives. They want to control and dominate everything we do and manipulate and use our very essence against us. And they do this in a number of ways, including what Epstein and others were doing by trafficking young girls and boys, because this does involve men as well, who grow up and are abused themselves and often end up abusing others. This is a reality that is taking place, and we need to question it. We need to oppose it. We need to look into the truth of this matter. We can't turn a blind eye. Being conscious, being awake, being aware, being woke, whatever you want to say, does not mean only meditating and only, let's manifest the positive good things. Don't talk about this crazy pedophilia, Derrick. Just stick to 5G or just stick to this or, just stick to the comfortable topics. Don't make me feel uncomfortable. That's why these people win, because we're afraid to be uncomfortable, because we're afraid to challenge ourselves. We're afraid to stare into the mirror and recognize that we have allowed this to happen. We have allowed these things, our own traumas, to fester in the human species, and these festering traumas lead people to wanting to dominate others and to control others. And when we choose as individuals to heal our own wounds and to release that and to face that with vulnerability and to let our pain be unshackled and turn into healing, we're healing the human species. And as long as we as individuals and collectively are fucked up and tormented inside, we're going to continue to see that. There will be a moment of truth we will have when the Epsteins of the world and the Weinsteins and the Bill Gates and the others and the people who conclusively are shown to be connected to this stuff, we will have a moment of truth. And in that moment of truth, you're either going to become the monster you've been fighting and rip them to shreds and use violence and use anger and use hatred, or we will come at this from the heart, centered, and seeking accountability and truth and justice, but doing it in a way that does not turn us into the things we oppose. Those are my thoughts on this, guys. Thank you so much for following. Thank you to everybody who's watched my Epstein documentary, Bringing Down Jeffrey Epstein. If you haven't seen that, you can go to our documentary page here and watch that. You can find the link to the article that I was going over in the description below. I'll put some of the other links as well. And until next time, guys, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.